Alright guys, so I'm going to go over the example problems that were done for you to make sure that you can know where they got the numbers from. So the first, we're going to start with the Pythagorean theorem. Now remember, Pythagorean theorem is how we can find the missing side of a right triangle when given two of the sides. And our formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs and c is the hypotenuse. And remember, the hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle, and that's always C. A and B don't matter as long as you get C to be correct. So every time you go through and see a right triangle, I want you to write, and it's telling you to find a side, and you have two of the sides, you should use Pythagorean theorem. So you should tell what A, B, and C are. So it looks like in this case, they said A was 6, and B was 4. Now, again, it does not matter which side is A and which side is B, as long as C is the hypotenuse. So if you switch 6 and 4, it would have been fine. So we have 6 squared plus 4 squared. 6 squared is 36. 4 squared is 16. When you add this together, you get 52. Take the square root and then approximate to decimal if it tells you to. If it does not tell you to, leave it as a radical, but do simplify it all the way. If you need help simplifying radicals, I have 2 videos about that on the channel. So the next one says Shane marched 3 meters east and 6 meters north. So you can see in the picture they started here and they went 3 meters east and 6 meters north. So that means my A and B are 3 and 6. So we get a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A squared, it looks like they used the a equals 3 and b equals 6. So you don't always have to have the smallest side as your a or the second smallest side as your b. And it looks like they made the b equals 6. So you'll notice on the first example, they used the smaller side as b and the medium side as a. And on the second example, they used the smaller side as A and the medium side as B, and it doesn't matter one way or the other. So then we have plugged in for our amounts right here. And it says 3 squared plus 6 squared equals x squared, because x was our c. And then we had 9 plus 36 is 45, and square root of 45 is approximately 6.7. All right, and then finally, we have a word problem that gave us a leg and a hypotenuse. So we would have an A, a B, and a C. But this time, instead of being given the A and the B, we were given A and C or B and C. Let's see, they went with A, or sorry, B. So they're saying the A is unknown. That's the length of the ground. B is 12 and C is 13. And then they plugged those into their formula. Now they did x squared plus 12 squared equals 13 squared. I don't really like there's a missing step here or here. It doesn't matter which way you do it. But the way I would rather see you do this would be x squared plus 144 equals 169. And then subtract from both sides. 144. And when you do that, you would end up with x squared still equals 25. So I would actually prefer if you did this way where you took the squares first and then did the subtraction. It doesn't really matter, but if you were going to do it the way they did, there's still a missing step where it would say 169 minus 144 here in this step. Should say 169 minus 144. So you definitely need to find what the squares are before you start doing the subtraction. Okay? All right, so what I'm going to do for number 1 for your practice problems is I'm going to go ahead and help you set it up. So we have Natasha walked from the library to the grocery store and then to her house. She started here at the library and went to the grocery store, which appears to be 1.7 miles, and then from the grocery store to her home, which appears to be 0.9 miles. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick two sides. I'm going to say this one's A and this one's B. And of course, your unknown value is C. So we're searching for C, what is closest to the shortest distance. So what that's saying is when you round, you're going to pick which of these numbers is the closest to that number. And the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line segment, okay? And that is why we're looking for the hypotenuse. We want the shortest distance between the library and the house. All right, so go ahead and write your formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And you also need your list. So that would be A equals either 0.9 or 1.7. I'm going to put 0.9. B equals 1.7. And C is unknown. So now you have what you need to put into your formula. So you have 0.9 squared plus 1.7 squared equals some unknown, and then take the square root. Now, guys, when you get to these last two questions where it says, what have you learned and how has your thinking changed? Please don't just put no. That's not an answer. No is not an answer. Yes is not an answer. These are not yes or no questions. What I want to know is, what have you learned? Whether you learned it now or whether you learned it the first time we went through this, that's not important. What I want to see is a description of what the Pythagorean theorem is and how you use it. So make sure you're not just giving me 1 to 2 word answers. If you already have done that, go through and replace those answers. 5, if you're thinking about the Pythagorean theorem has not changed, that is fine, but please don't just say none. I want you to say it hasn't changed since the last time I studied this. Something along those lines. All right, so your next one is going to be about 45, 45, 90 triangles. Most of this you could do with regular trigonometry, which we'll go over next week. But in this case, we're just going to go ahead and cover them again. Now, remember, we had in a triangle a 45, 45, 90, and this only works for special right triangles. So remember, in a 45, 45, 90, if two of the angles are the same, then that means two of the sides are the same. So what that tells me is that both legs are the same length. Okay? And in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is the leg times the square root of 2. Now, there was a way we derived that when we watched the Pythagoras was a murderer video, which I'm going to go ahead and post the link to that as well in case you're interested in revisiting it. But what we learned was that if we take a triangle that has one right angle and both legs are 1. If we did this with the Pythagorean theorem and we had a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then we're going to end up with a equals 1, b equals 1, and c equals something. So we have 1 squared plus 1 squared equals c squared. Well, 1 squared is 1. 1 squared again is 1. And c squared is still c squared. 1 plus 1 is 2 equals c squared. And if you take the square root of both of those, c equals the square root of 2. So that is why a square root of 2 is your hypotenuse in an isosceles right triangle. It does not matter what the sides are. It's always going to be the side length times the square root of 2. Because in our 1, 1, square root of 2 triangle, it's going to work that way. And if a is 1, then a square root of 2 is just square root of 2. And when we change the other side lengths to be, say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, that's just multiplying our original square by that same size. So if we're multiplying both legs by 8 and we want a similar triangle, because all isosceles triangles are similar in right triangles, it needs to have the same proportions. So if we multiply both legs by 8, we have to multiply the hypotenuse by 8 as well. And that is why we had that table that we were working with. So we had our tic-tac-toe table. So if we had a side length of A and a side length of A, and our hypotenuse was a square root 2. Okay, so then we plug in based on the picture we have, and I'm going to go right here, this picture. This is a leg, this is a leg, this, the side opposite is leg square root 2. So the important thing is to figure out what your two legs are, and they are the ones that make up the right angle. So we're going to have one side is x, one side is 8, and one side is y. So what we have here is that a equals x, and we have that a equals 8. If I substitute 8 in for x, or for a, then I get that 8 equals x, because both a and 8 and x are both equal to a, so therefore they are equal to each other. So if a is equal to 8, then this is still 8, and a is equal to x, then this is still 8. And we have y equals, well, we have a square root of 2 equals y. So if we have a square root of 2 is equal to y, and a equals 8, we can substitute 8 in for that a, and we get 8 square root of 2 equals y. All right, in the next example, you are given the hypotenuse and asked to find both legs. So again, we make our table just so we have a reliable source of data. Our sides are a, and our hypotenuse is a root 2. All right, so we have x and y as our side lengths, and 12 root 2 is our hypotenuse. So what we need to do is solve for a. A equals x and a. Okay, the hypotenuse is not changing its length. But we do need to say that a square root of 2 equals 12. And now we need to solve for square root of 2. So let's divide both sides by square root. So we're going to solve for a and divide both sides by square root of 2. Square root of 2 over square root of 2 is equal to 1. So that's a equals. And then we have 12 over the square root of 2. Now, we do not like having radicals in our denominator, so we need to make an equivalent expression. To make an equivalent expression, you need to multiply by some form of 1. It can be 1 over 1, it can be 5 over 5. It does not matter so long as it equals 1, which would keep the expression equivalent. All right, so what we do is we're going to multiply it by square root of 2 over square root of 2. And the reason we're using that form of 1 is that square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. 12 times square root of 2 is 12 square root of 2. But 12 is divisible by 2 to get 6, so we get 6 square root of 2. So x and y are both 6 square root of 2. And finally, we have a right triangle with 45, 45, 90, and it wants us to solve for m and n. So again, we're going to make our table. A square root of 2 with an equal sign. And then we have one side length that gives me 5 square root 2 is a. N is my other one, and m is my hypotenuse. Well, a is just going to be 5 square root of 2. N is also going to be 5 square root of 2 because it's an isosceles right triangle. But now we got to figure out what m is. So m equals a square root of 2. A is 5 square root of 2. So m equals 5 square root 2 times square root 2. And as we said over here, square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. So we're going to end up with m equals 5 times 2, and m equals 10. So our hypotenuse is 10. Now, if you have any questions about anything on this, just make sure you let me know. We'll have live chat on Monday. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is go ahead and help you set up number 1 for the practice problems. So first off, it wants us to find, tells me that AB is 10, angle B and angle C are congruent, and the third angle is a 90-degree angle. So if C and B are congruent, they must be, by definition, 45-degree angles, because 180, which is the interior angles of a triangle, minus 90 is equal to 90. And if we divide that by 2, because there are two angles that are congruent, and congruent means the same, Each of those angles is 45 degrees. Now, if C and B are congruent, then that means AB and AC are also congruent because they are opposite the matching angles. So what that means is AC is also 10. So they want us to find the length of BC. What is this right here? Well, again, we know from our previous example, we have A square root 2. A is the side lengths, and BC is unknown. So what you're going to do is you're going to figure out where to plug that A in. Once you have A, plug it in. What is BC? What is the answer there? And it is multiple choice, so you should be able to figure that out. All right? Make sure you plug in A where it goes. Draw the tables on a separate sheet of paper. It will help, I promise. And if you need to, highlight the side length. Sorry, in this app, my highlighter doesn't work. So if we highlight one side length as A and the other side length as A, right? When next week when we get to trigonometry, I would recommend having at least 2 or 3 colors available, okay? Now, again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, but we will be doing live chat on Monday at 2 p.m. Make sure you're prepared for that, and I will send the link out on Google Classroom. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy and keeping your social distance. Remember, your entire house should be treated like one unit. Every single person counts as one person in your household. So if you go out and you get exposed, you're taking that back to everyone in your household. And then it's going to get out to anyone in their circle that they have to be with. So especially if your family or family and friends are considered essential workers, please keep your distance. It's not because you don't love them. It's not because you don't want to be with them. It's because you want to keep them safe. All right. So if you have any concerns, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to chat. Talk to you later. Bye.